This is probably going to get buried, but I have two stories to share. The first one happened back in high school when some friends and I discovered an old, abandoned house. We had gone inside once or twice to check it out and mess around. It was a modern-day walkout basement style, where most of the basement was underground, except for one side with a door. The basement door was secured with a big board nailed across it, making it impossible to get in. The board looked like it had been there for a long time. One day, we decided to break through the board using a crowbar to get inside. We entered the basement, and it was filled with old stuff and dust, typical of an abandoned house. As we walked further in, we noticed a small cleared area with a piece of paper in the center and a red rose on top of it. We went over to check it out. The rose was plastic, but strangely, there was no dust on it at all. The paper was even more bizarre. It had a pentagram with strange symbols around the edges. Neither the rose nor the paper had any dust on them, even though the basement had clearly been shut off for what seemed like years, or at least months. The whole scene creeped us out, so we left pretty quickly. About a week later, I was cleaning out my truck and found that same piece of paper folded up in my back seat. I asked my friends who had brought it back, but they all swore they didn't. I still think one of them might be lying, but who knows? When I was around 9 years old, I was terrified of my room. It was an empty blue room with hardwood floors. Looking back, I don't have any particular bad memories about the room, but I do recall always feeling uneasy whenever I was in there. I lived in that room until I was 10, and I never felt completely comfortable, although there were some obvious reasons for that. There was a small cabinet that led to the pipes under the bathtub, and sometimes bugs would crawl through and scuttle over my radio. To avoid the bugs crawling on me as I walked to my bed, I would run and jump straight onto the second bunk. What really scared me was something that happened shortly before I moved out of that room. I was sitting on the top bunk, reading a book with my flashlight. After a while, I started to feel tired. I always slept with my door open, but until that point, I hadn't made a habit of looking into the hallway. I heard someone walking up the stairs and thought it might be my sister coming home. The footsteps got closer, and then I heard a voice in the hallway say, "Hello?" I don't remember what I was thinking at that moment, but I do remember staring as a dark figure came to my door. It stood there for a moment before slowly walking toward my bed. This is where my memory becomes vivid. I started crying harder than I ever had. I tried to hit the figure with my flashlight, but it didn't move. It was just darkness. No matter how much my flashlight illuminated the area around it, the figure itself remained as dark as before. Suddenly, I heard a door slam, and my parents came rushing out of their room. The figure was gone. To this day, I'll argue that it was just a bad dream, no matter how real it felt. When I was home from college during the summer, I worked as a morning cleaner at the local movie theater with a couple of friends. The theater was fairly new, built in the early 90s, with 3 large screening rooms, 4 mid-sized ones, and 3 small ones. My job was to clean all the screening rooms during a shift that ran from 4 a.m. to 10 a.m. It took me about 20 minutes to get to work from where I lived. The theater was in a relatively remote area that used to be a mix of wetlands and farmland, with some land owned by a local nature center. For the first couple of weeks, nothing out of the ordinary happened. Typically, there would only be 2 or 3 of us working each shift, and we spent a lot of time alone, cleaning and listening to our iPods. Occasionally, we'd meet up with the day shift in the morning to update them on any maintenance issues we encountered. One day, my manager asked if we had noticed the front doors being unlocked when we arrived. When I said no, he told me that customers, primarily women, were complaining about a tall, lanky man in a suit who followed them from theater to theater, and sometimes even into the bathroom. Several women had come to the front desk, terrified, describing a 7-foot-tall man in a black suit, complete with a bowler hat, who walked slowly after them. The police were called a few times, but they never found anything. The teenagers who worked the day shift referred to him as the tall man. While he mainly targeted women, occasionally, a male coworker would catch a glimpse of him sneaking into a theater. When they tried to confront him, he would always disappear. The theater had 12 screening rooms in total, but Theater 5 was the worst. Nobody wanted to clean it. Even my boss seemed apprehensive about it, and I didn't understand why. Theater 5 was unique because it was located behind the bathrooms and the lobby, so to get to the seating area, you had to walk down a long, isolated hallway. At 4 a.m., with only a few other people in the building, Theater 5 felt especially secluded. People who cleaned there complained of nosebleeds, constant headaches, and the feeling of being watched. My first supernatural experience happened there. It was a normal morning. I had just finished sweeping the lobby and was cleaning up Theater 5. My routine was to throw away leftover cups and popcorn before vacuuming and sweeping. As I was doing this, I couldn't shake the feeling that someone was behind me. I kept turning around, and even took out my earphones at some points to shout, "Hello?" But there was no one there. I went back to my work. About 20 minutes later, I was at the top back row, sweeping under the seats when I heard footsteps, someone running. I looked down and saw a little blonde-haired boy turning the corner into the long hallway, running out of the theater. I threw down my broom and chased after him, but when I got to the lobby, there was no kid. My boss, Jeff, was outside the front entrance, on a smoke break. "Who was that kid?" I asked. Jeff looked at me, confused at first, then he laughed and said, "So you met Charlie?" Charlie was another thing customers frequently complained about. People often said they saw a little blonde-haired boy running up and down the aisles, causing a lot of noise during movies. Of course, this always happened in Theater 5. When an usher would go to catch him, the boy would already have disappeared. The female staff affectionately named him Charlie, after the character in Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory. Charlie was also known for knocking over trash cans, scattering papers, and misplacing things, making the job of a morning cleaner a real pain. We used to joke that he was the son of the tall man, but the two were never seen together. My only encounter with the tall man happened a couple of weeks after my run-in with Charlie. I hadn't heard about him yet. Had I known, I would have quit sooner. Usually, the first person to arrive in the morning was responsible for going up to the projector rooms to turn on the lights in all the theaters. This was an easy task, except the top floor with the projectors had a lot of life-sized cutouts of movie characters and large posters, which made it creepy in the dark. I had done this several times before. Since I was the first to arrive that morning, I went up to turn on all the lights. The projector area itself was dark, and we typically carried a flashlight while going around flipping switches. That morning, the flashlight was missing. We later found it in the garbage, probably Charlie's doing, so I walked through the dark hallway of projectors, flipping all the switches. I had stayed up all night watching the Andy Griffith Show, and I remember whistling the theme song to myself as I walked. Once again, I got that feeling of being watched. Something in the area with the projectors overlooking the IMAX theater rooms caught my attention. I stopped whistling and tried to focus my eyes. It was a cardboard cutout. They were everywhere, so I dismissed it and was about to flip the next switch when the cutout moved. I froze. What I thought was a cutout was actually a figure hunched over. It started whistling the Andy Griffith Show theme, imitating me, only much more slowly. Slowly, it rose from its crouch, revealing itself to be at least 7 feet tall. It was a man. All I could see was a silhouette against the red exit sign lights and some of the projector monitors. He started walking toward me, still whistling. I wanted to move, but my feet were cemented to the spot. I couldn't speak or scream. The tall man took a few steps toward me, then suddenly turned and walked into an office down the hall. I turned and ran down the steps, waiting outside the theater until my boss and the rest of the crew arrived. I told them what happened, and they explained that the tall man existed but wouldn't hurt me. I didn't care. That experience alone was enough for me to put in my 2 weeks' notice.